Welcome to the Hot Cage Podcast. My name is John Franklin. This week we're going to talk about a ton of topics that include but are not limited to Anderson Silva versus Roy Jones, Hendo versus Shogun 2, Vanderlei versus Chael on Tough, Chris Lieben, Juliana Pena, and we will preview all the relevant fights for UFC 169, Barao versus Faber. I will do all of this with my special guest, so let me bring him in without further ado. He is a light heavyweight for Rage in the Cage, set to do battle on March 1st in Phoenix, Arizona at the Celebrity Theater. He is Leroy Lullabye Douglas III. Leroy, how are you?
I'm good, brother. How you feel, man?
I'm doing fantastic. I finally got someone on here that, I always have great guys on the show, but I got somebody on here I'm really excited to talk to about fights. So let's jump right into it. So first off, we're gonna hit the flurry, which is just our headlines. All right, so there's talk that Anderson Silva may fight Roy Jones before he would re-enter the octagon. Now, I want to come at you with this from a couple different angles. Lately, Dana White's been doing a lot of talking about boxing. He has a documentary. He's talked about, just how he feels about boxing. Do you think this is kind of a little bit of a preview to maybe that he's going to promote a Anderson Silva Roy Jones boxing fight? Do you think there's any validity to this fight? What are your thoughts on this?
Man, I come at that from two perspectives. One is that, first of all, let me just say Anderson Silva is by far my favorite fighter in the world, and he might be the only dude walking around that I'm legitimately scared of that make me want to get some Pepto-Bismol. But outside of that, it's weird because Anderson and Roy have a ton of respect for each other. If you look at the video of behind the scenes at UFC 168, Roy came in and talked to Anderson prior to the fight while he was getting his hands wrapped. And they seem kind of buddy-buddy. I don't know if it's just for show or they're nice to each other, but there's really some underlying something there that they really want to fight because Anderson feels that he's good enough to be a pro boxer, which I think he may be. I don't know about Dana doing it. Dana always says that boxing's his favorite sport. But as far as promoting Roy Jones and Anderson, you're talking about Roy is a little older now, and then Anderson, I couldn't imagine him doing that and risking anything happening to Anderson with the money that he stands to make for Anderson's comeback fight, regardless of who his comeback fight would be against in the UFC. You know what I'm saying?
I agree, and that's always been Dana's stance. His stance has always been, I will not sacrifice the UFC product for any sort of ancillary things.
Exactly.
And so what fascinates me about the thing, I agree with everything you just said. What fascinates me about it is what else would be the end game of this? Because it's not a publicity stunt because they stand to gain nothing from anything other than fighting one another. That's what fascinates me about it. What else could be the thing? The other shoe hasn't dropped yet. Is there like a documentary?
Right. That's what I'm wondering. Like now, I mean, don't get it twisted that Dana and the Fertitta brothers like money, like a lot of us. So, is there money there for Roy, who is definitely a legend in his own right from the boxing game? Anderson, arguably the greatest to ever do it. I don't even like to just say in MMA, just as a fighter in general in combat sports, the guy's a stud. And no one's ever done it like him. So maybe there's something to gain there. Maybe they both want to get a little extra money. But even then, I don't think it's a financial gain for Anderson because he's doing okay. So maybe it really is Dana's passion for boxing, but I just don't see him ever promoting it. And as you stated before, there's just no way he's going to put his product out there, and especially not one of his biggest money makers. He's not going to spend the time or waste his time, I guess, promoting that. I think that's more Anderson and Roy on their own.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess the last thing I would say on that is that maybe the Roy Anderson thing starts to make sense when you realize that there's really not a lot of meat left on the Anderson MMA bone. They just go, well, really not that much left for him in MMA either in that he's interested in or people are interested in seeing him. So why don't we just go ahead and let him box Roy Jones? Okay, up next.
I will say just quickly on that, for Dana, another reason that he probably wouldn't be interested is because there's a ton of money to be made. I think there's still a huge interest on will Anderson come back, and I think he will. And if he does, who does he fight? And then there's a big buzz from a lot of people, including fighters, like, hey, I want to see Anderson come back. Is he going to annihilate the poor guy that he fights when he comes back,
Yeah, that's true. I agree. All right, so up next, I want to talk about John Hackelman went on Joe Rogan's podcast and said that before Chuck Liddell retired, he tried to change his fighting style. Chuck wanted nothing to do with it, and obviously we saw how Chuck's career went from there. So, I mean, do you think Hackelman was right? Do you think that at that point in a fighter's career, you should be trying to tinker with how he fights, even if it may give him some more longevity, or does it put him at risk? What are your thoughts on a coach trying to change the way a fighter fights towards the end of his career?
So I think with Hack in particular, doing it with Chuck, I get the idea in a perfect world. Okay, let me just take this fighter and let's say if that was myself, hey Leroy, you're older now, you've been knocked out a couple times. I'm gonna change your style. It's the right thing to say. It sounds great, but it doesn't work. It goes into the whole adage that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And Chuck's thing was that crazy right hand with dynamite in it, throwing it over the top. He was never known for crazy cardio. He even had that little pudge with a semblance of a six pack above it. That just wasn't his thing. And I don't even think it was him really shunning Hackelman so much, but Chuck's thing was, I can knock you out, and maybe you knock me out. I mean, look at how he got knocked out by Rashad. It was him about to throw, and Rashad was faster and did it to him. I just don't think you can change that with Chuck. So I think it was a mistake as far as that fighter. I think it's a fighter by fighter situation, and Chuck's not the guy to do that. He wants to knock you out with his right hand and then tell you he's going to drink beer and party in Vegas after the fight.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because towards the end, I mean, never mind. I mean, I'll even give the Rashad fight because Rashad, I mean, he threw a bomb and Rashad was in his prime. What concerns me was when Rich Franklin took him out, kind of going away, like backing up. That's when you knew the chin was done. So that's when it was like, I don't know. I mean, I trust Hackelman's been around for a while, and I trust him. But, it is a really difficult thing to say. I'm going to change who you are as a fighter. But with that being said, these guys have so many facets to their game they don't really plug into. But if you're gonna go in there, you got to go with what you feel strong with, right?
Yeah, that's correct, man. And there's 3 points I would say to that. First of all, to mention what you said on the extra facets that guys would have, including Chuck. The key word in MMA is mixed. But I mean, and Chuck has a wrestling background. That's what people forget. But the thing about it is, man, he was a guy who threw bombs better than other guys threw bombs. He would knock you out. The other side of that too is it's the human nature. You resort to your lowest level of training under duress, right? Everyone knows that, whether you're a professional fighter, amateur, or whatever. So it's not saying that Chuck has a low level of training, but his natural instinct is I'm going to try to knock you out, and maybe I'll get knocked out trying. And then most importantly, when a guy's that old, if you really want longevity, my mom would say, hey, Chuck, you're friends with Dana. You can work with the UFC like he is now. If you really want to do him a favor, maybe after what happened with Rich, or even after Rashad, you start talking to him about, is it time to back out? As opposed to changing his style, because he could still get hurt even if you give him the best training and he becomes the most conservative fighter in the world. He could still get hurt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, up next, Dan Henderson re-signed with the UFC, which kind of set the stage for Hendo Shogun 2. Hendo Shogun 1 is arguably one of the greatest fights in UFC history. You wouldn't get an argument from me about it. I loved it. And you know what it is? It's one of those fights, and I used to say this with some buddies of mine, I call it the senior circuit. When guys stop sort of competing for, they're like Chichi Rodriguez out there, still hitting golf butts and all that. That's what I like. I like when you get these guys that are at similar points in their career and set them up, and they're at a. You know what? Even when Tito was supposed to fight Rashad, it kind of had a little bit of a feel to that. I know it was Bellator, but I think Rashad was way above Tito at the time.
You talking about Rampage?
Oh yeah. Rampage. So when they were going to fight, that was kind of a senior circuit fight where these guys aren't what they used to be. But man, if we could have caught them in their prime, great. We didn't, but they're at the same points in their career. When Vanderlei fought Chuck, they were still a little bit closer. But I mean, these are the kind of fights I like. And these guys, I mean, listen, Shogun never went to a fight that didn't turn into a war. So that dude gets ready for, he puts on his metal helmet and grabs his sword, and everything is a war to him. And Hendo's right there. Hendo's going to load up that right hand and just look for your chin all night. So for me, I was super stoked about this. But I don't know. I mean, it's 6 fights. To me, the fight has Fight Pass written all over it. I don't know if I'm going to have to subscribe to watch it. So it concerns me because I think it's in Brazil. So what are your thoughts on the fight, the future for these two guys, and are we going to have to probably subscribe to Fight Pass?
Well, to take that, I'll go back to front there. As far as Fight Pass, I definitely think it'd be a great opportunity for them to sell it to get us hooked. Get your little free trial because you're not going to sell a pay-per-view with that as a main event. Obviously, you're not even going to put that on your main card. But there's too much respect for them to have them on some kind of undercard or have them on a Facebook fight or anything like that. But more importantly, it's kind of what you mentioned before, the senior citizen. I was just thinking in my head, the geriatric convention. What interests me about it is it does take it back to the old school. These are two guys who will fight. They will try to kick your ass, and neither one I think has aspirations to be a champ anymore. But it's kind of I'm a legend, you're a legend. Let me see if I can knock your head off, being Dan Henderson with that big dynamite right hand, or if it's Shogun, let me see if I can kickbox you to death, and put you out. But they're both a little old. I would say for both of them, um, bang it out one last time and hang it up. But I definitely agree with you on the idea that it's got Fight Pass written all over it. I can't see where else they would put it.
Yeah, and I like the fight too because I mean you could almost call it part of your retirement plan because they're going to go in there. It might be fight of the night. They might be able to put a little, a couple of get that nest egg a little thicker by getting some bonus money. All right, so up next, Vitor Belfort will request a TUE, which is a therapeutic use exemption, for TRT, which is testosterone replacement therapy, when he fights Chris Weidman for the belt. Why this is relevant is because the fight will most likely happen in Las Vegas. Vitor has had some issues in the past with Las Vegas because he is Dana seems to think he's going to have no problem getting his license in Vegas, and passing everything he needs to for the fight. The issue is that everybody seems to be seeing that Dana isn't, is that Vitor in the past was popped for performance-enhancing drugs in Vegas, which caused him some problems. You're not supposed to be able to get a TUE once you've been popped in the past. Correct. So does this become problematic for Vitor, or Vegas is without question one of the dirtiest towns there is? So does this just kind of get figured out because there's too much money to be made?
You hit the nail on the head. I'm not even going to try to give a fighter's explanation of it or an educated explanation of it. Point blank, there's a lot of BS that happens in Vegas. There's a ton of money on the table for that fight, especially another Brazilian, and then there's a Brazilian. All the storylines. He got knocked out in incredible, devastating fashion by Anderson Silva. What if he knocks out Chris Weidman? What if? They will make it happen. But I find it fairly hypocritical of Vitor because I'm just going to call it the eye test. For a guy his age, he it looks like TRT is running through his veins or whatever it is. That doesn't look natural for most guys his age. So I think he's actually blowing smoke. But however you call it, he will definitely have his license, and there's just no way that the Nevada Athletic Commission turns his license off.
Here's the beautiful thing about Vitor Belfort, and in full disclosure, he was one of the guys that got me super into sport when I was young. Obviously, he's an early fighter, but he was the one where, as my sort of desire to watch UFC waned, he was the guy that brought me back. Here's this 18-year-old Brazilian. Now, with me, I always thought, because they told me he had a black belt from, I believe, Carlson Gracie, I was like, wow, this kid's got these kind of hands, and he's got a black belt. So I was always expecting him to start tapping guys. It never happened. I mean, the kid fell in love with his hands with good reason. But I was figuring he was gonna be the ultimate guy. Here's a black. He's Hoist Gracie on the ground, and he's whoever Don Fry on the feet. So for me, I was so excited about him fighting. Now here's the thing, and I'll give all credit where credit is due to Larry Pepe, who's a guy I listen to on Pro MMA Radio, friend of mine. He made the greatest point about Vitor Belfort I've ever heard. Vitor Belfort's coaches say the reason why Vitor Belfort is who he is his work ethic. He says what people don't see about Vitor Belfort is he trains twice a day and he goes on these monster sessions. He does this and he does that. So what Larry Pepe said was, well, if he can do that without testosterone replacement therapy, why is he on it? And if he can't do it without testosterone replacement therapy, how is it not a performance-enhancing drug? So it's really as simple as that. If it takes that thing to provide this, if you're touting Vitor Belfort's work ethic, but yet telling me that he needs TRT to do that, have that work ethic, then we have a performance-enhancing drug on our hands. So, it'll be interesting to see. I do want to see the fight. Sometimes, it's tricky with this MMA business because I talk to a lot of varied people about a lot of varied things. Some of the guys I talk to are like Fight Opinion, who he's in there trying to find all the corruption, and he's like outside the lines for MMA. So if you want to go down that road, man, it's tough to just be dealing with all the negative stuff, or if you just want to watch the fights. So, I mean, I don't know if I want to look at this from just like Weidman and Belfort's a great fight, and if they sanction it, what do I care what he's on, or do I, should I care? It's just tough. So
Well,
I don't know. I don't know how to wrap my head around it. What do you think?
I'm kind of with you there. My response to that, though, as a fighter, first of all, I feel like regardless of what a guy's on, everybody can get knocked out. Let me just be blunt. And also, if you saw what Tyron Woodley said recently, he said that he's pretty sure that a couple of the guys he's fought that he didn't want to name, but in his last 6 fights that he's put out, were on some kind of performance enhancing drug. But when it comes to Vitor specifically, first of all, let me just throw it out there. I actually think he can beat Chris Weidman. And second of all, I agree with you. If the idea is that he's older and he's using it basically to keep himself in good enough shape and strength to be able to compete at the highest level, which is at a championship level, then it's 100% a performance enhancing drug. So it's kind of, I don't know, it just makes him look foolish in my eyes.
I think, on some level, you got to own it. You either have to. History is gonna ultimately decide what, and that's where Dana finds himself in a weird spot, because he comes out against it, and then fighters who are on it are holding belts and stuff. So I think that you have to just kind of make your peace with it and say, listen, this is what it is, and these guys are on it, and it's whatever.
I'm against it. I will say that my thing is mano a mano, man up, fight. When Father Time tells you can't do it anymore, and you, regardless of how hard you work, you just can't get it done, hang it up. That's my stance.
Yeah, that's true. There's something to be said about that. So
American school
I don't know. We'll have to see what comes up next. All right. So I want to talk about UFC on Fox 10 real quick, from a perspective of the local fighters. So there was 3 lab guys that fought at UFC on Fox 10. They went 2-1. One was a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? The Ben decision, as all Ben decisions are. I don't know why it's so hard to judge a Ben Henderson, but it is. And so that there was some controversy there. I don't know if I agree with the controversy, but it is what it is. So he was victorious. What were your thoughts on the fight? I did see something pretty profound on Twitter about the Ben Henderson fight, where everybody said 2 things I think happened that caused problems for people watching this fight. Once the announcers told us they thought Josh Thompson broke his hand, everybody thought the fight was over, and they just kind of said, well, he gave it a good shot. Too bad. This was his big shot, but he broke his hand. And secondly, the thing I saw on Twitter a lot was people were going, okay, I can understand that you might complain about the Henderson decision, but tell me how Thompson won. Like, what did you see that made Thompson the winner? And I was like, I really can't put together a convincing argument for Thompson. So if that's the case, then I guess Ben won. But Ben's not the kind of guy that's gonna have these huge knockdowns you can point at, or he just kind of, the whole fight is just on you. So what did you see in that fight that sticks out to you?
Well, a couple things. The first thing is, if you listen to what Javier Mendez said, Josh's coach, he said something very poignant. The issue was, and the controversy comes in for me, is not so much that Ben won, but did you see the scoring? Who the hell had it 49-46?
Right.
Kind of alluding to what you were saying. Ben wasn't that convincingly dominant over Josh, and vice versa. Josh wasn't dominant over Ben for either one of them to get a 49-46. So that creates controversy in and of itself. But this is no different than some of the fights with Frankie. I actually am okay with Ben winning. I went back to watch it again just to make sure what I saw, and I almost look at it like the NFL. There's no, you have to have irrefutable evidence to overturn a call, right? If they would have given it to Josh, I wouldn't have cried about it. Just personally, I think Ben's a great guy. I've seen him a bunch of times, obviously, being a local fighter and having some mutual friends and whatnot. So I'm okay with him winning. He definitely did enough to win, but so did Josh. I'd have been okay if they called it a draw, let Josh's thumb get healthy and do it again. But I guess the question comes down to that. They gave it to Ben, but like you said, show me where Josh got 3 rounds for sure, 100%. And I don't think you can. So I'm okay with Ben winning. But like I said, on the flip side, if they would have given it to Josh, then it would have just been another loss for the lab, along with Yasin.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that we're going to lose Josh Thompson potentially to retirement, and there's talk that he was going to do it either way, which I find hard to believe that he would retire with a sitting title shot. But
right.
he's got his own thing going on. I honestly think that all the guys that are on Fox that just put me to sleep. You want to talk about Lullabye? Those guys that, that those analysts, they just don't work for me, man. I don't. Brian Stan, they're not for me. Josh Thompson would be a hell of an analyst. Carlos Condit would be a hell of. I mean, there's some guys out there that I want to hear. But so I mean, if Thompson leaves, I think there's a lot out there for him. He's got dash cardio. He's got things going on. So I think that we look at him and we're like, why would you ever want to stop fighting? And he's like, well, I got other shit going on. Like, I mean, that's it. And if I'm coming here and killing myself in these training camps,
Absolutely.
and then I'm on the wrong end of a decision, I mean, that's got to be tough. So, all right, let's move on a little bit more further down the card. Stipe Miocic beat Gabriel Gonzaga. Gonzaga didn't look that hot, so the fact that it took, all 3 rounds to get a decision by Miocic doesn't really get me super excited about him in the heavyweight division. I mean, does he excite you?
Not at all. I'd like to see him try baseball again. Because the thing is there's a couple of, and I'm not trying to slight the guy, but listen, I'm looking at, people are talking about Frank Mir and Overeem coming up, and I know we'll talk about that in a moment, or might be old and washed up, but I don't even see Stipe getting past them. And I don't know what he would do with Kane. I don't know what he would do with Junior. There's just 3 or 4 guys above him that he's not going to do anything. And like you said, it took too long to try to put Gonzaga out, and he didn't. So he's just going to be a guy that's a decent fight to watch, and that's probably where he'll remain.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about the fight game. I mean, if you're paying attention, these things sort of get figured out for you. I mean, the reason why I'm sure Joe Silva had him fight Gabriel Gonzaga is so that Joe Silva can figure out, well, we know where Gabriel Gonzaga is at in his career, and if he surprises us, so be it. If he takes Stipe out, he'll get another fight with a guy with a name. But if Stipe, who's supposed to be this guy that we're thinking is moving up these ranks here, what does that record that he has mean? What does that mean? If you're Joe Silva, does it mean that he was better than some guys on some nights, or does it mean? I mean, listen, the guy's 11-1. The only person he lost to is Stefan Struve. So if that means something, then we'll find out. If you're a true 11-1, and maybe you had a bad night against Stefan Struve, then you should run through Gabriel Gonzaga and not take him 3 rounds. We find out. So, all right. Next,
and he's not, because I couldn't even see him getting past Travis Brown. I think Travis would knock him out in the first round.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the guys that are on the list that we'll talk about later that Frank Mir and Alistair Overeem have fought lately, in their last couple of fights, I think that Stipe would have trouble with. Travis Brown dispatched of Josh Barnett like he was a little kid, and I mean, I think Barnett would be more than a handful for Stipe Miocic.
Absolutely.
So I actually wouldn't mind seeing that fight just to let Josh Barnett get back on the right track. All right. Donald Cerrone got Adriano Martins. There's a lot of talk going into the fight that Martins was ready, he was coming. Cerrone didn't even scout him. He was like, I'm going to focus on what I'm going to do. I'm going to go wakeboard. I'm going to go wakeboard, drink a 6-pack, and show up, And he KO'd him. Next thing you know, there's some more bonus money for him. So, I mean, Cerrone, he's in a packed division. They sort of talked about him and Ben maybe fighting. I know they're kind of friends, but Cerrone seemed open for the fight. Ben, not so much. I mean, Ben will fight anybody, but, I'm sure there's people he'd prefer to fight. So, I don't know. I mean, what do we make of Donald Cerrone? Is he sort of like a Mickey Ward or Toro Gotti type guy who's just going to give us great fights and never get to that next level, or is he something more?
No, actually, you know what? It's funny you mentioned. I think he's not only is he above them, but I think he's way, way above that Mickey Ward league where I'll just scrap, but I'll never kind of be the champ. I actually think Donald, it sounds cliche, but it's mental, bro. And here's my deal with Donald Cerrone. When he's on, when you see him decide against Melvin Gillard, who was one of his friends, and he's like, okay, I'm going to kick him in the head now, I'm going to knock him out. When you see him really, really do his thing, Donald Cerrone is a bad boy. That's one white dude that scares me, even though I'm a lot bigger than him. But and I think now the whole Donald, let me drink a 6-pack, let me hang out, let me be a cowboy and, do my thing up there in Colorado, not even watch videos of my opponent and then go scrap. I think that works for him. And I think the time will tell when we see him fight a top 5 or top 6 guy. Then we'll really know.
Yeah, and next up was real quick, Stevens versus Elkins. Didn't do a lot for me. Stevens looked sharp. Elkins looked like, he's kind of, sliding down the ranks.
He looked
expected more. He did. But I want to get to the next fight because Another lab guy, our man, Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres, just
Yeah.
went ahead and closed out Sergio Pettis, who was on the rise. I've kind of took to Twitter, and I think that maybe for the time being, we should call Sergio Pettis Eli Pettis, much like, the I like
Yes,
Eli
sir.
Pettis for now. So, and listen, I'm a Giants fan. Eli's got 2 titles. So when
Yeah, that's
Sergio
two
gets,
of us.
it might
Yeah.
be an insult to Eli, but I think it's funny that he's like, not quite his brother. But
Right.
that aside, I mean, that kid was in there and he was legit. I mean, he popped Alex a couple times, and it was a solid fight. And then, I mean, I don't want to say Alex needed that submission, but he went and got it late in the fight. And
Absolutely.
I mean, $100,000 for his trouble. I mean, it was a close enough fight. It got fight of the night, and then he got
Right.
the money for the submission. So I mean, what is next for Alex Caceres? I mean, because here's a guy 25 years old that's got a
Right.
lot in his interview. When you think about Alex Caceres, because of his time on Tough, he was so young. You almost think he's a veteran. The kid's 25. So I mean, if
Correct.
he's figured it out now, he still has. If he gets the mental together, he's still got a long career ahead of him.
And
So, what do you take from this fight?
well, I think first of all, I think he's getting the mental together if he's not already there. And I think it's funny you mentioned his $100,000. Now he's going to start up his vegan farm in Oregon. That's what he said in his interview with Ariel Helwani. So good luck with that. So he'll be healthy. He'll never miss weight. But but no, all kidding aside, first of all, I love the fact that he's Bruce Leroy. Not the fact that it's my first name. And then on top of that, I actually think Alex is a scary, scary fight. He's like a trap game. You mentioned football. He's that squad that you play and they're just kind of middle of the road and then you lose because the dude has a lot of tools. He can take a hit. And then I agree with what he said in his interview with Ariel Helwani, which was that was a setup. They just thought that not only would Sergio win, but he'd probably finish him, he'd submit him, maybe knock him out, and then move on. And here we go with both the Pettis brothers kind of taking over. I'm happy to see him win. I think he's earned a big time fight, and I think he poses a lot of problems for a lot of people because he's so long and he is so super calm. Regardless of what you do, the guy never ever gets mentally shaken inside the cage, and that's hard to do, man. And I'm saying that from experience.
And he's funky, man. He's got. I mean, I would never compare anybody of Alex's skill set to anyone to Anderson Silva, but I will compare them in this sense. He's loose. He's
Yeah.
loose in there, and he kind of, you see it. I mean, he can. I mean, I was cursing him on Twitter because he got me playing that damn Paul Simon song for like a week on Spotify. I was like, Jesus, this song's legit. It fits him like a T. I
Yes,
mean, he
it
played it,
does.
and I was like, I'm about to reach out to this kid and try and interview him and ride around in my truck listening to that song. Like, that was my idea of a great day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but he's loose like that. And when somebody's like that, let me tell you something funny that the UFC does, though, with regards to Sergio Pettis and Alex Caceres. What they do, this is the beauty of The Ultimate Fighter. It's sort of like American Idol in a sense. So with American Idol, you're going to have people on, they're going to sing, they're going to get a bunch of votes. So by the time they win, they already have a built-in audience. There's already 24 million people that care about them. So when it's time for them to sell records, you now know that there's going to be at least half of that are going to buy their records. Same thing with The Ultimate Fighter. The funniest thing about fighting that you hear sometimes is, does a guy's, oh, it was the thing about Tim Tebow I heard once. They said Tim Tebow's name is way bigger than his game. And sometimes with the tough guys, their names outweigh their games. And that's what I think they thought with Alex. They were like, if Pettis beats him, everybody knows who Bruce Leroy is. Now, wherever he's at in his career, nobody's going to give a shit. They're going to be like, he beat
Right.
Alex.
Right. He beat a name. Exactly.
Look, it looks good on your resume. It doesn't matter here's the funny thing about resumes. When you look at Sergio Pettis's, you don't see Alex Caceres's. All you see is his name. So if he's on your resume and he's a known guy, you don't know what his last 3 fights were when you're staring at Sergio Pettis's resume. So I think they kind of, set him out there to be a sacrificial lamb, and Alex blew the whole thing up. He's like, not only am I not going to play your game, I'm going to take $100,000 of your money while I'm not playing your game. So, I'm going to flip the whole script on this shit and have you guys go back to the drawing board with Eli Pettis and figure out what's next for that kid. Because I know I'm on the rise. So that's what I loved about it. I loved that he went in there loose as hell and did it. I mean, it's not even like he went in there loose and kind of danced around the whole fight. He went in there loose and finished him.
And he did it right in front of Anthony. That's what I love even more about it.
Yeah, suited up. And it's like, yeah. So, all right, let's move on. So, Bellator. real quick. My only Bellator hit of the week sets up a light heavyweight tourney. They got King Mo on one side, Rampage on the other. Obviously, it's a 4-man light heavyweight tournament, and the thought is that they're going to fight each other. My question to you is, does it make sense to put two guys in the middle of this fight that sort of generates money when you're Bellator and you don't have a lot of shit going on right now? Why not just put them as the undercard of Alvarez Chandler, throw it on a pay-per-view and call it a night? Why set it up? I mean, King Mo just got knocked out by Emmanuel Newton last year. Rampage
Right.
is acceptable. I mean, if Rampage was out there murdering people, he'd still be in the UFC. So, I mean, does it make sense to put a guys in front of them? Or are they just trying to like kind of bullshitty keep their tournament myth alive? Or does this make sense to you?
No, it doesn't at all. Now I will say, as far as two brothers talking shit, they can both do it with the best of them, and it may be one of the best pre-fight lead-ups that you'll ever see. But then once you get in there, you're talking about a guy in Rampage who can knock you out if you don't leg kick him to death, and then you got King Mo, who we see his chin is a little suspect. My interest in the fight is about as interested as I am in sticking a nail inside my ear. And then on top of that, I mean, Rampage is like 78 years old. He should just call it quits. And you want to talk about, you mentioned earlier, great commentators. If you could get him to not curse on network television, he might be the most honest commentator you've ever had. If I was Fox, I would definitely sign him up and see how he did, because he would tell you what he thinks and who he likes and who he doesn't and how much he hates Dana. He'd have your ratings through the roof. But as far as this fight, I'm with you. If you really want to do something and make some money off it, let him talk a little crap, have a great build-up to a fight that's probably going to go to a decision, and definitely have it on the undercard of the Alvarez fight. But they're not going to.
Yeah, because Bellator can't get their shit together. It was funny when they were going to do the Rampage Tito fight. I was on this show talking to Larry Pepe and the like, saying, come on, you guys got to make Rampage and Tito the undercard. Your guys have to be the thing. People are going to watch the fight. If you put Rampage and Tito on the card, no matter what, they're going to watch the pay-per-view.
Absolutely.
But you got to send that your guys are more important than some guys you brought in. You can't have some UFC cast-offs as your main event. Say, listen, it's fine these guys are here. They're our co-main event. And Alvarez and Chandler are what matters in Bellator. They should have sent that message, and they didn't. Fortunately for them, the pay-per-view didn't go off anyway. But the funny thing about King Mo and Rampage is you're looking at a guy that went to Rampage Rashad. I was at that fight. And I thought the goddamn roof was going to come off. I mean, they were pounding the floor, everybody. I mean, it was the craziest. I've been to a couple fights. It was the craziest scene I've ever seen for a fight. And the fight was no, it did not.
Yeah.
And here's why. This is the thing sometimes about talking shit to your opponent. Sometimes you talk so much shit, in my opinion, you would know better than me. You talk so much shit that when you get in there, you're like, oh, boy, I don't want to be embarrassed by this guy I've been talking shit to. Right. So then neither one of them want to engage, and it's like death to get knocked out by the guy you've been talking shit to for like 6 weeks. I mean, nobody wanted to fight worse than Rashad and Rampage. I mean, they were talking shit to each other in the Ultimate Fight every shot they got, and it just fell flat. So I don't know, man. King Mo and Rampage, this has been going on for a while. I mean, that thing with them in a bus forever ago that was on YouTube, that was a long time ago. That's when Rampage was still the man. And I don't know. I mean, the funniest thing Rampage did for me this week was he was beefing with Tyrone Spong on Twitter, and he called himself washed up. He's like, I'm a washed up fighter. I'll still beat your ass. I was like, damn, you realize you just called yourself washed up?
First of all,
I'm like, yeah.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I think Rampage doesn't want it with Spong. I think he'll kickbox him to death. Depends on where they are and where it happens. Maybe he'll take off his dog chain and beat him with it. But the deal is, man,
he's gonna have to.
Yeah, he's gonna have to. I mean, who do you hope watches this fight? What are your ratings gonna be like? There's a reason why Bellator is. It's not even fair to say that they're placed second fiddle to the UFC. I mean, they're just not even in the same league, man. They're a glorified, like, local promotion who made it big. That's how they look to me. You know what I mean? There's nothing to this fight. There's nothing to this fight.
No, I mean, calling them second fiddle is like they're like playing the UFC's a symphony and they got a triangle. Like
right.
what's going on here. So I mean, I don't know, and yeah, with Sprong, you're right. Rampage stopped giving a shit about leg kicks a long time ago. So much so that he would call his opponents out about standing with him. He tried to
Right.
Jedi mind their ass into not kicking them. They were like, "Fuck
Right.
you, we know you can't."
Right.
He's just
Right.
gonna let you talk us into standing when you're knocking dudes out. All right,
Right.
up next, Vanderlei Silva and Chael Sonnen fight in air quotes on the set of The Ultimate Fighter. I haven't seen the video, so I don't know how legit it is. This is a recipe for A ratings and B disaster. What do you think about the Vanderlei Chael tough? First of all, Chael's coaching Brazilians, and secondly, I mean, I don't even know if we fully have this fight signed yet. Do you think it's gonna happen? Because for all the shit talking, Vanderlei seemed very hesitant to put his some ink on some paper.
Right.
So, what
Right.
do you think of this fight and about the tough?
First of all, I heard about it. I'm with you. I haven't seen any video proof, but even if I saw the video, I think it's going to be as contrite and made up as when Vanderlei rushed to Chael. I can't remember where they were, but you know what I'm talking about. He went up to Chael and he had like 10 of his guys with him, and there's a
His
bunch of
camera.
security. Yeah, and there's yeah, and he had his camera. It just seemed so fixed to me. You know what I mean? It was a great soap opera, and it was great for ratings, and neither one of them were going to fight at that time. I do know that Chael wants to fight. I think maybe the UFC thought they were capitalizing by having him there and just having Vanderlei and Chael both coaching Brazilians. Maybe that would get Vanderlei to say, okay, fuck it, let's do it. I don't see it happening. I actually think Vanderlei thinks he's going to lose, so he won't. So,
Yeah.
he might as well stick the axe on his tongue, cut it out, no pun intended, and just shut
Yeah.
up and coach the show.
And you know what? It's funny. It's a tough thing with fighting because I've talked about this before. Sometimes Dana White doesn't tell you the whole story, and you got to kind of put two and two together to figure it out for yourself. So Dana says, "I'm offering everybody in the world this fight. No one's taking it. Why are they not taking it? Is it short notice? Is it whatever?" And I think for Vanderlei, all the shit talking aside, it's a horrible matchup for him. So if you're Vanderlei, are you like, well, shit, do I want to fight this guy? I know I got beef with him, but I want to fight a guy who I know can take me down, is just going to take me down. And listen, in Chael's defense, he's not a lay and pray guy. He takes you down and he works. But it's like, I don't know, man. It's a bad matchup for him, but he doesn't want to seem like a pussy. I don't know how he wants. If you're Vanderlei, what do you do, man? I mean, it's a bad matchup for you, but yet you got to defend your honor. So do you just say, well, I know this is a bad matchup, but damn, I mean, that's the precarious position he's in. He's trying to do what's best for himself and defend his honor, but yet he knows the end of the book like the rest of us do, right?
But he's been talking a lot, and so I don't feel sorry for him at all. If he was quiet about it, saying I just don't like Chael, or something of that nature. I mean, Anderson Silva and John Jones both talked less about Chael when they knew they signed on the dotted line to fight him than Vanderlei is, and he hasn't signed. So put up or shut up. I mean, that's what that
Yeah,
comes down to.
and I like the way you put that because honestly, there is a way to do it. If you're Vanderlei Silva, you can just say, the fight doesn't make a lot of sense for me, and then you're kind of saying a lot by saying a little. That can mean a
Correct.
lot of things. It doesn't make a lot of sense
Correct.
for me because you don't think it'll help your career. It doesn't make a lot of sense to you because it's a bad matchup. So, all right, up next, George St. Pierre had a brief, I guess, internet rumor about that he was going to sort of be at the forefront of putting together a fighters union. So I'll ask you quickly, A, what do you think about fighters unions? And if there is going to be one, would it take someone who has the clout of George St. Pierre to make it happen?
I'll answer the second question first. Absolutely, it would have to be not all the champs wouldn't even be able to. It would have to be a John Jones, St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, a couple of non-champs, maybe like Uriah Faber. You know what I mean? People that just have a big name. Um, and then as far as a fighter union, I look at it two ways. Are we really talking about a union for protection of fighters, like the NFL is trying to do concussions and stuff like that, or are we really talking about fighter pay? Because that's been the big deal. I mean, let's just be real. The fighter pay in MMA, whether at the local level or at the UFC level, guys aren't getting paid what we know the profits are coming in, and I think that's more what it's about. But then again, St. Pierre is one of the richest guys to ever do it. I think he's third as far as overall money
Yeah,
behind Chuck, and I don't remember who number two was. So,
Anderson.
oh yeah, and Anderson. I just don't see it happening. How would it happen? You'd have to have a bunch of fighters on board together. what they would want to know what they stand to gain. I mean, if I'm in the UFC, what do I stand to gain with the union? Does it guarantee me more fighter pay? Is Dana and the Fertittas going to do what they said? Well, fine, then we up your pay, but then we take away bonuses. You know what I mean? Which in essence, you're still at the same level of pay.
Yeah, and that's a good point you brought up, because here's the interesting thing where I'm kind of conflicted about unions and fighter pay. Once you take away the incentive for someone to go after a bonus, it really is going to, because the studs are always going to be the studs. John Jones doesn't go out there to crush people for bonuses. He goes out there to crush people to be great. I mean, he wakes up in the
Absolutely,
morning wanting to be great. But
absolutely,
the guys that are chasing those bonuses are the ones that fight on the prelim cards and the undercards, and that's what separates MMA from boxing, is the depth of the card. Like, you can watch the prelim. There's been some cards where the prelims were better than the main card.
absolutely.
So once you lose that, once guys have no incentive to fight, for all his greatness, Floyd Mayweather is, I don't want to say he's not a fighter, because I really think what he does is great, but I think that he doesn't, his main objective is to win. That's where
Absolutely.
he makes his money, by winning. So if he ever comes to a point where he's in like a fight, like a legit fight, it's the fifth round, and he's like trading with a guy who just came to bring it, I can guarantee you 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are going to be more of the same shoulder rolling, and he's going to get that win. GSP is going to get that win. So once the payment structure changes, the way that guys fight change, and once the way that guys fight change, the demand for people to watch the UFC changes, and that affects fighter pay in a sense, because once the desire is no longer there, if MMA became about a bunch of guys going to 3-round decisions, the interest would definitely wane. So I don't know where I stand on it. It's tough.
Yeah, the thing I would say though is if you increase the pay and then there's a greater chance of getting cut, or maybe you realize you can lose sponsorship by being that boring guy. I think to play devil's advocate on the other side of it, I would say this. We mentioned guys like John Jones. There's some rugged dudes out there. I mean, when you look at the local fighters, you talk about Ben, but there's guys out there that really do want to scrap. John Moraga is a great example. John is just like he's Maryville, he's West Side. I just want to beat you up, and I don't want to lose. You know what I mean? Like flat out, regardless of what he's getting paid. Jamie Varner is similar. Obviously, he's not the same guy as Moraga, but he wants to scrap. I mean, even for a guy like myself, man, ultimately, sometimes my male ego is there. It can help, and it can also make you lose. But it's just, I think for a lot of fighters, you'd be surprised. There's just that I wanna take your head off because I want to go back to all my people at home and say I whipped this dude's ass. You know what I mean? But I do see what you're saying as far as maybe if I know I'm winning and I'm guaranteed 200,000 instead of 26,000, and I'm winning the fight midway through the second round, maybe I just take my foot off the gas and I kind of lay and pray. You know what I mean? Instead of trying to finish you for that additional 50 grand.
Yeah, and there's something in what you said too that I think is fascinating about this, and it's like, so if I told you, let's say the UFC roster is 500 fighters, I'll just use that as a round number. So if I told you that I'm going to increase fighter pay, but now the UFC roster is going to be 300 fighters,
Absolutely.
those other 200 fighters are now in other organizations. They don't have the marketability. Maybe the UFC saturation that's a huge complaint everybody has. The UFC saturating the market. So I don't know. Now, would I rather be the Facebook fighter, the prelim guy who can compete for those bonuses, or now I'm on Bellator. Now I'm on wherever I'm on. So it's tough. To keep the roster thick like they do. They got to pay guys what they pay them. You would think, because we don't know what the numbers are. That's the part that's crazy, is that they don't have to release the numbers. So you would think they got to be somewhere near. I mean, if Floyd Mayweather makes $40 million and John Jones doesn't, that extra money's going somewhere. So where and why? You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. But what's funny is we kind of just answered the question, and I think what we answered is it is kind of fighter specific because John is a great example. He is probably, I don't know his numbers, but he's probably making more money from Nike and his various sponsorships than he is from his actual UFC paydays. I mean, think about it in the grand scheme of it. But yet he still takes your head off as if he's a guy on a prelim just trying to get an extension on a UFC contract or just get another fight. You know what I mean? So
Right.
some of it is fighter specific, but then again, yes, money motivates people in a lot of ways, kind of the Deion Sanders syndrome, what I
Yep.
call it. People said Deion never made a tackle, and he said, "Yep, but I bought my mom everything she ever wanted in the world," and he still considered Wiley to be the greatest corner to ever do it, but he was safe doing it. You know what I mean? So it's you have guys that fight like Deion, and you have guys that are balls to the wall, and then I think if they started paying more money, legitimate money, six figures and up, and they trimmed the roster, forget just from 500 to 300 or something. I'm saying, maybe you have 25 guys tops per division. It would make guys fight because it'd be
Yeah.
too easy to get cut.
That's true. They have no choice. All right, let's move on. Michael Bisping is cleared medically to fight Tim Kennedy. There was talk about you got to worry about Bisping because the issue was with his eyes. So anytime a fighter's going in there, I mean, he's cleared medically. So the hope is that they're not sort of saying, all right, you're close enough. But do you have an interest in Michael Bisping fighting Tim Kennedy because there was a rumor that he could potentially be fighting Luke Rockhold, and I guess the juice between Bisping and Rockhold was that Bisping said he used to spar with Rockhold, and because of the sparring and he kind of got the drop on Rockhold, so he called himself the unofficial Strikeforce middleweight champion. So I don't know. I mean, I'm more interested in the Michael Bisping Luke Rockhold fight than Tim Kennedy just doesn't do it for me. So do you have any interest in this fight at all, Kennedy and Bisping?
I do, because first of all, I just think Bisping's a douche. Let me just be honest. Let me just
Yeah.
be real blunt. So if Tim Kennedy wants to pull a hendo on him, and knock him out and then lay another, I actually think Tim Kennedy would obliterate him, to be honest. But I'm with you. Kennedy's kind of boring, but he is who he is. He's Ranger up. He's kind of handle my business. He's not going to say a lot. He's not real flashy. But I would definitely like to see Rockhold. I'd like to see Luke against Michael more. And I think there's some personal stuff. But then again, it goes back to Rashad and Rampage, what you said before. All of that chit chat. What if they get in there and they stink up the joint? You know what I mean?
That's true, and the funny thing for me about about Tim Kennedy is when I talked to John Krause, we talked about this. Kennedy is in that group of guys. The funniest thing that Michael Bisping said, and I even replied on his Twitter when he said this. He goes, "I'm gonna walk through Tim Kennedy." You can say a lot of things about Tim Kennedy. No one walks through Tim Kennedy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
You don't walk through Tim Kennedy. I mean, like you said, he's got that military background, but if you think you're going to walk through Tim Kennedy, you better pop in some tape and get your head out of your ass because you may beat him, but that guy's not getting walked through. He's one of those guys that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. You have to either knock him out cold, or it's probably going to be a bloody decision. But you're just not. What are you going to do that's going to scare the guy? Think about the shit that he's seen. You're not scaring
Right.
him. He means it when he says, "Hey, I'm not afraid. I'm going to go in there and try to handle business." That's what he does. And
Yeah.
Michael Bisping also said he was going to knock out Anderson Silva before. Remember? And how
Yeah.
many how many knockouts does Bisping have?
I don't think there's any.
Yeah, exactly. He has as many knockouts as Mayhem Miller, but he's talking about he's going to knock somebody out. So I think the guy's living in his own world out there in London.
Yeah, and that's true. It's funny you say that about the military guys because I remember when Chael fought Brian Stan, his line was, Brian Stan's not scared of me, Brian Stan's not scared of 10 of me. So if that's the card that Bisping wants to play with Kennedy, it's going to fall on deaf ears for sure. All right,
Exactly.
Chris Lieben retired from MMA. Well, there's a few Chris Lieben topics to talk about. He retired from MMA. Apparently he hasn't paid any taxes. And the word is he spent most of his money that he earned in the octagon on drugs. Now, here's kind of in the old saying, are you burying the headline? My question is, how do we have a functioning drug addict in the UFC and nothing ever came of it? I mean, how did he get – if he spent all his money on drugs, I don't know how he could – either he was – I don't know. That to me is eye-opening, that he could have spent all his money on drugs and done enough drugs to – blow. I mean, this guy was making some money, and yet never popped for tests. Never. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. So, but on Chris Lieben, what are your thoughts on all this stuff, man? It's a lot. He's retiring. He's not paying taxes. I mean, is this a guy? And you hate to say this, in 5 years, are we going to be reading this kid's obituary, or is he going to get it together?
Right. That's what I was going to say, man. Is he going to be? We lost Evan Tanner in a different way, obviously, out there in the desert. But with Chris, I don't know the whole thing and how much validity there is to spending all his money on drugs, but he definitely there's some things that says he's lived a hard life. I just put it that way without trying to judge the guy. But listen, man, Chris the Crippler leaving. I mean, did you see his fight when Anderson Silva came into the UFC? That told me everything. Chris was a guy who would keep walking forward, which allowed Anderson to make a highlight reel out of him. I don't even know that he ever fought to be a champion. That was never his thing. He made some money, and then as far as what happened when he fought Uriah Hall, that was kind of just the icing on the cake. But the guy was done. Whose decision was it to bring it back anyway? Danny says how much he loves him. You put him in there with a stud who you threatened to cut, even though he's good, and you said he's boring, he doesn't have a killer instinct. So you say, here we go, we're going to put an old, washed-up dude who's in his 30s but looks like he's 50. His body is probably 65. I don't really have much of a thought about it. I thought he should have been done. I was surprised that he came back to fight again. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
what has he done in the last 7 years? Who's he beat?
I mean, not much. So, I mean, if you look down, I mean, listen, I'm on his Fight Finder, and I'm seeing a lot of red, not too much green. So, I mean, he's been in there with a lot of guys. He's one of those guys that you're gonna look at, and you're like, man, for a fighter, you could write a hell of a book. I mean, that might be where his real money gets made from. I mean, when Chris Lieben writes his book, Jesus, between the drugs, the not paying taxes, and all the guys he's fought, I mean, to get absolutely destroyed by Anderson Silva, I mean, that's the kind of shit that makes you just go home and fucking do drugs. I mean, that's the shit that
Right.
wonder what's my place in this fight business, what's my place in this world. I mean, that just deprives you of who you even are as a man, and then to come back from that and knock out Vanderlei Silva. I mean, is it the pride Vanderlei Silva? No, but he did it. And then he goes in there. I don't understand how you get Uriah Hall after you lost to Mark Munoz, lost to Derek Brunson, lost to Andrew Craig, and now you're fighting Uriah Hall. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But Dana's always said he has a special place in his heart for Season 1 guys. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, if you care about this kid, you got to start doing what's right by him. But I worry about that.
Maybe try to clean him up and do what you did for Chuck and let him make some money for the rest of his life working for the UFC. You pay Chris Lieben $50,000 a year and let him be comfortable forever, whatever you do. But the deal is I don't know how much love you're showing by putting him in there with Uriah. Imagine if Uriah really did have the full killer instinct that a lot of guys have. I mean, because he hurt him, and then it looks like that was the first time. Oh, go ahead.
Imagine if he even did to him what he did to that Sella kid on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah,
I mean,
with the spinning wheel kick. Yeah.
You want to subject your guy to that? I mean,
Right.
I think on some level, again, the matchmaking gets curious, and things happen like Dana's like, well, here's my guy. I don't really know where Uriah Hall's head's at. Maybe Chris Lieben has that moment where he flattens Hall, and we're all singing his praises again. I mean, he went on that run. Lieben did, where he took that fight on short. I think he took the Vanderlei fight on short notice.
He did.
And he was he fought, he beat Aaron Simpson, beat Akiyama, which at the time Akiyama was sort of a big deal, lost to Stan, and then came back and beat Vanderlei. So how he got to fight Vanderlei if he lost to Stan, I don't know. But it's just I don't know. Like you said, give the kid $50,000. Tell him the conditions of his employment are you're drug tested, and bring him in. Like bring him in to the UFC, you know what I'm saying? Make him a part of your program to where he has some responsibilities. He's got to hit his damn alarm clock. He has to set his alarm clock for 7 in the morning and put a button-down shirt on, and make him part of society.
And
All
take
right.
that damn black nail polish off.
Yes, make that part of his contract. No black nail polish. Black nail polish is one of those things, Leroy, that it doesn't mean that you're gonna be up to some shit, but it usually leads to you being, no one puts on black nail polish to go do some bad shit, but once you have it on, you're probably gonna do some bad shit.
Bad shit happens, exactly.
I want to talk about Juliana Pena, and what I want to talk about her is there's two completely conflicting stories. I don't want you to tell me what you think is right and wrong, because who the hell knows? Yeah. What I want you to tell me is what's going on in this gym, do you think, or in gyms where this could happen either way? I mean, obviously, they're saying that she goes too hard. She's saying that she was attacked. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to make heads or tails of it, but either way, she's out 2 years. So something drastic happened. I can't imagine her going too hard in training and being out 2 years and doing all that damage to herself just from overtraining. Am I naive, or is there more to it?
Well, no, you're not naive at all. You know what's funny? When I first heard about it, I thought about what's his name, Rustamar Paharis. Remember how he got in trouble twice for not letting go of leg locks?
Yes.
And then even though the guy was on a win streak and probably headed toward a legitimate, contender fight, Dana cut him. Well, with that, I will say without taking sides, it just seems odd, kind of what you said. The idea that people get hurt all the time in training, but a 2-year injury and everything, from what I read, everything is torn. But from going hard, I mean, we've all gone too hard before, and someone had to check us and say, "Hey, let's take a step back. It's just training. Your fight's coming up. My fight's coming up. Blah blah blah." I could go on and on, but it's very odd. But here's the deal: women train with guys all the time. There's local fighters. There's a local fighter here named Shasta McMurray. She's a stud in her own right. She's a personal friend of mine. She trains with guys that are her size, sometimes a little bigger. And people go hard. You always think about the fact that it's a female, but she's also a female who can hurt you if you joke around. It's a catch, man. I think they're making too much about the fact of men and women training together because it's happening right now as we're talking. But in the same breath with her, I just really want to know what the hell happened, man. Because this is a weird, weird scenario. 2 years, brother? I mean, Anderson Silva, we saw what happened live, and he's not out for 2 years. He's out for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. Well, okay. Again, I'm not saying I'm naive. I'm not saying I know everything. What I'm saying is this. Of what I've heard, here's what I believe happened.
Okay.
Because there's really some specifics to it that kind of strike me weirdly. So the one thing that I heard was she came into the gym wearing her Ultimate Fighter shirt, and they were kind of trying to check that. They were like, no, you're not a big shot, you're not whatever. What I think happened was she came in wearing a shirt. They started busting her ass about it, giving her shit, and they wanted to put her in her place. She then fought back, which is where this overtraining aspect comes in. I think that she started going harder because she felt somewhat threatened by the situation, and then the bounce back of that was whatever caused the injuries. I'm not saying she was attacked. I think that she was not zealous, that's not even a good word. I think that the reaction to her in what she felt like she was defending herself, whoever she was training with, the reaction to that was what got her injured. Because it's too specific that someone has a story of her coming in an Ultimate Fighter shirt, and that seems like a very specific lie.
And that's on a couple of reputable forums as well, a couple of reputable sites. And then on top of that, Dana White, think about what he was quoted as saying. He was basically saying, I don't give a shit what everyone's talking about. She called me hysterical and said I was attacked. And I have heard the same thing about wearing the shirt, coming in. I think initially it was probably okay, I'm going to go kind of hard with her, harder than I would normally go with a female fighter. And then maybe she went hard. We don't know the little nuances of it. But, brother, I'm going to throw it out there. It seems like someone grabbed her leg, the gentleman, whoever he was. They've left him nameless. I think someone grabbed her leg and didn't let go. And I'm just going to say that just because I won't be shocked if in a couple of days or a week or, maybe a little bit later, that's what we hear. Because to have, ACL, MCL, everything's torn, right? Everything's ripped up. Brother, that doesn't happen just from going too hard. Something pops, you're like, oh, my gosh, I'm out for 6 months. But you have to hold on. That's why I brought up Paul Harris. You have to hold on for that kind of damage to happen. And you hold on 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 seconds, you tear up everything that there is to be torn. I really think someone was trying to humble her, and it went too far.
Yeah, and now the guy who runs the gym feels obligated to say, he wants to protect the name of his gym, and he wants to say he kind of contributed to it. And I don't think there's an innocence here in the sense that she may have fed the situation by trying to defend herself. So I'm not saying that she was doing it. She was doing what they were doing. I'm just saying that she might have started going harder because she was trying to defend herself, and then this person was like, well, we're going to teach her a lesson, not thinking that it was going to put her out 2 years to be on national level. I mean, they're talking about this girl fighting Ronda soon.
Correct.
They're talking about because the women's division is not that huge, so they're like she might be 2 or 3 fights away from fighting Ronda, and now you're taking 2 years of her career away. I mean, and from what I know about Dana, I'm not saying that he doesn't say some crazy shit like calling reporters this or that, or he goes off the deep end
Right.
every once in a while. But I doubt that he would accuse someone of assault on Twitter unless he had it on good authority or he believed what she was saying or
Right.
what have you.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got too much at stake to just have someone. Now, granted, he didn't drop the guy's name, but to say assault, that was his words, assault. We
Right.
need to close the gym. Things like that. I mean, that's stuff
Right.
that you can legalities of slander.
He said, "Get out of that gym." Exactly. I was gonna say you got to think about UFC brass even above him, and that legal team would say, "Hey, let's be careful here and there." I think he knows more than even what he's let on. And then on top of that, I guess the good thing about him, sometimes he can be an ass. He, like you said, he says the craziest shit to people, but he wears his heart on his sleeve. So I think what he was saying was legitimate. The girl called him in tears, hysterical, saying what happened, and I think that we're gonna eventually find out that some foul shit really did happen. And let me say this: even if she did kind of antagonize it, if it does come out that it was another male professional fighter who just ripped her leg apart, literally, what a douche. And whatever negativity he has coming towards him, he deserves it, regardless of
Yeah,
what she did to initiate it.
yeah, I agree, and I mean, I'll be interested to see how the MMA community responds to that guy, and by that I mean fighters. I mean, there's already been on Twitter. Dana said, I don't know the seriousness of this. He's probably serious, but he said Chris Weidman has offered to fly the guy that attacked Juliana Pena out to Power MMA to train with him. So obviously Weidman's upset about it. So I saw something online about guys were reacting to it.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to, but I mean, there's nothing good. I mean, at some point, I mean, you got to kind of throw that sort of domestic violence type assaulting women thing out the window when you train with them. But when you go beyond what the normal parameters of training is, it goes back into that world. When you're
Right.
yanking legs and you're doing that kind of stuff, it is assault. I mean, you know what you're doing, and you know what.
Right, exactly. And just my stance personally as a man, as a husband, as a father, and as a fighter, I'd have no problem putting my shin to this guy's chin. I mean, it's there's no other way to say it, but then it's a bitch move, man. I mean, excuse my French, but that's what we call it. And it's outside of MMA. There's no honor, there's no integrity. And then it's another reason why you can't get MMA in New York, even though we know that's a whole union thing and some issues. But a lot of people have a problem with MMA. They say it's barbaric and there's nothing to it, even though you and I both know that there's a lot behind it. But this doesn't help the cause when you got some idiot hurting a female.
That's true. And you know what? You could not have served a segue up any more perfectly because the fact that that MMA is not in New York is the very reason why they are fighting at the Prudential Center this weekend in New Jersey. The Super Bowl obviously is in New Jersey, a giant stadium. But the area is New York, and that's where, they want everybody to be. So, it's funny. It'd be great if 5 years from now we find out the person that was keeping MMA out of New York all along was like the mayor of Newark because
Right.
Newark gets all the fights that New York doesn't. That would be the greatest if he was the guy just subversively saying all this negative shit about the UFC all these years to boost his economy. So let's talk about the fights. Let's get into that. February 1st, tomorrow, 2014, the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. It is UFC 169. The headliner is Renan Barão versus Uriah Faber. It's for the bantamweight title. So let's talk about this fight for a second. It's the main event. Two former combatants, they're hooking up again for the championship of the world at 135 pounds. We've seen this fight before, which is to say that we've seen these names before. I'm not sure these two fighters, the way they are currently constructed, both in skill set and mindset, were the ones who walked into the cage back on July 12, 2012 in Calgary, Alberta, Canada for UFC 149. The last time we saw Uriah Faber, he was sending Michael McDonald back to the drawing board by taking him completely apart.
Yeah.
When we last saw the champion, Renan Barão, he was throwing Eddie Wineland a beating. The spinning back kick started it, and the punches finished it. The common opponent here, other than the fact they fought each other before, obviously, is Michael McDonald. It took Barão 4 rounds to find the triangle that got Mayday to tap, while, again, Uriah Faber beat Michael McDonald like they pulled his ass out of the crowd.
Yeah.
So the question to you is, is this a different fight than the first one?
It is, but you may be surprised what I have to say about this. So here's the deal. I think that Uriah is completely, it sounds cliche, but he's a different cat. He is, all his tools that he has, it's almost like he's in his prime, but now he has even more of a killer instinct. If you can even imagine, he stepped up his submission game even more. his guillotines, and he just looks like a man literally possessed, kind of what Joe Rogan said, and it looks like he can beat everyone right now except for Renan Barão. People forget that, what is he? I believe 33, 34 wins in a row. And then on top of that, Renan is better now, and I think he's owning the idea that I'm not the interim champ now or any of that nonsense waiting on Dominic. I am the man, and then I'm training with Jose and this Novo and Yao and Pederneiras, and we're doing this together. I actually think he's going to destroy Uriah because he's a matchup nightmare for Uriah, and he hurt him last time. I actually think he may knock him out this time. So Uriah has stepped his game up tenfold, and then I think so has Renan. So I think we still have the same gap as far as Uriah he's gonna be the best Uriah we've probably ever seen, and it's still not good enough to beat the best Renan Barão. I think Renan beats him, and I think he beats him convincingly. Uriah's only way to win is that guillotine. I think it's gonna be a submission. I don't see him standing there trading with Renan. Renan he makes me nervous, man. He's like going into a crowd in Brazil for a World Cup game with a USA jersey on. I don't know, man.
Yeah, and well, here's the few things. Well, number one, Renan Barão hasn't lost since 2005, so wrap your head around that. It's 2014.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And number two, in what we've seen of Renan Barão, we really haven't seen him in trouble. That's the thing. I mean, when you start to figure out how to beat a guy, like we'll use Floyd Mayweather for a second, or even like John Jones. We've seen John Jones in trouble. Alexander Gustafsson figured him out, but when we did see it, it was like, I mean, he wasn't hurt necessarily, but he was getting, he was gotten to.
Right.
It was so weird to see it. Like I couldn't even in my mind picture Renan Barão in trouble. So now not only do you have to get him in trouble, you then got to finish him. I mean, getting somebody in trouble and wobbling him, or that's a whole different story than absolutely taking him out. It's
Right.
like I don't know what it is to see Floyd Mayweather in trouble. So I don't know. I mean, I think that Uriah is a better fighter, and I want to pick him because I want to see him and Dominic Cruz fight again. Although I'd like to see Renan Barão fight Cruz if and when Cruz is ever a fighter again. But I don't know, man. I agree with you. I think that this is, if Uriah Faber's ever going to beat him, it's now. But he may never beat him. So that's the tough part. I'm going to take Uriah, but I'm going to do it with my heart and not with my head. So I can appreciate more what you're doing. The way I'd like to see it. I mean, when he was in his prime and he was crushing folks, he wasn't half the fighter he is now. But neither was the rest of the world. That's why he was so dominant. So now
exactly, and that's what I was gonna say on that is I look at Uriah when people say that, it's like how Tito was a dominant champ, Chuck was a dominant champ. When you look at guys like that, imagine them fighting even the number 8, 9, or 10th ranked fighters now. Some of those guys would have put them out. No one wants to say it is blasphemy and all that, but it's true. You know what I mean? Look at the champions of 10, 11, 12 years ago, and then look at the number 6, number 7 guy now. And I think, like you said, Uriah, my heart wants to tell me to beat him, and I would love for Uriah to be the champion and Dominic come back and Uriah whip his little honorary cocky ass. But I just don't see how Renan loses. I mean, does Uriah have enough power to put him out? Is Renan going to make a mistake? Because remember, he's a stud on the ground too. Is he going to leave his neck out to get guillotined? I mean, I can't find a way for Renan to lose, I guess. I mean, everyone can lose, obviously, but I just don't see where Renan loses.
Yeah, and he's the complete package. I mean, and he's really got Uriah's kryptonite in those leg kicks. I mean, Uriah. I can't even close. If I'm having a bad dream, 9 times out of 10 it's about Uriah Hall's leg or Uriah Faber's leg after he fought Jose Aldo. That thing was
yes.
I mean, I couldn't have beaten Uriah Faber's leg with a bat and got it to look like Aldo did. Right. So for me. And I know that Barão's got those same skills, and I know they train together. And here's the thing: nobody ever talks about. Barão could be better than Aldo, and they're not going to fight because they're friends. But I mean, he could.
I think he is. I think he
right.
wins.
No,
I think he wins. Yeah.
Between the two of them.
If they ever fought at 35 or 45, I think Renan wins both times.
Yeah. So that's a problem.
I think he is.
That's a problem for Uriah. Okay, so speaking of Jose Aldo, while we're on a roll with our segues. Okay, it's the co-main event, but could be the best fight of the night. Jose Aldo is the champion at 145 pounds and may be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world now that we no longer have GSP, now that we no longer have Anderson. His opponent, Ricardo Lamas, however, seems ready. The lights don't seem too bright for the kid, and being that there seems to be a changing of the guard going on in the UFC with all these champions, this could be the bully's time. Last time out for Junior, it was the Korean Zombie, and the fight ended after 4 with a freak injury to the Zombie. When we last saw Ricardo Lamas, he finished Eric Koch in the second round with nasty elbows.
Yes.
So the question is, does Lamas have enough to take the belt away from Aldo?
Yes, I actually think Lamas does have enough to take the belt away from Aldo. Um, the question is, what if Jose shows up as Jose and kicks your legs like it's a soccer ball that he wants to, bust in half, and he decides I can't lose for Brazil. You know how they are, and he wants to go back and give Hennen the biggest hug in the world and tell him now you go maintain your belt also. It's a scary proposition. I don't think it's clear cut, but I have it picked with my head and my heart for Lamas. I think he's just a quiet killer, and then I think the UFC will be pissed because he probably won't be an entertaining champ similar to Kane. And I love Kane, but I think he'll be kind of a boring champ. But I I would be shocked if he wins, but also I'm not going to be shocked if Aldo wins. I don't think it's kind of a pick 'em for me in this one.
And it's kind of like you said, it's kind of a trap fight. I mean, Aldo has definitely bigger fish to fry out there. I mean, I think everybody sort of thinks that if he beats Ricardo Lamas, the next fight could be Anthony Pettis, because Anthony's division's so funky, they might just let him fight. I can't see the UFC letting two sitting champions fight each other and diminish one of their mystiques, but who knows? Sometimes every once in a while you just got to give it up for the fans and just say, we're going to let these guys fight. But they don't have a history of doing that, so I don't know if we'll see that. But, Lamas, it's funny with young guys, man. Sometimes they want to go in there and be great like John Jones, and sometimes they're like, damn, I'll be fighting for titles for years, and they don't realize that you got to grasp them when you get them. And sometimes they don't come back around. Look at Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes was in there with Jose Aldo, and look how hard it is to get the fight again.
Yeah.
Same thing. Right, he did get the Dominic fights, but I mean, after Aldo kind of cleaned him out and Dominic beat him and Hennen beat him, after he lost to Hennen, I'm sure nobody was like clamoring to see Uriah fight Hennen again. And then look what he had to do. He had to completely just destroy Michael McDonald to get this fight. So I hope that Ricardo Lamas is very present in the moment and understands that, this is not going to be, Dan Marino says, when I went to the Super Bowl, I was so young, I thought I was going to be going there all the time. So Lamas may just think that he's going to be in that top 2, top 3 forever, and I hope that he understands the gravity of the moment and understands that this is it. I mean, if I don't get it now, it may never come back. So I don't know. I want, if we're going with our hearts, I kind of want to see Aldo fight Pettis. Maybe it's a greater likelihood he fights him if he loses, but I'm a matchup guy. So even if Lamas beat Aldo, it would in no way affect my desire to see him fight Pettis. So that's just me.
Exactly.
So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it. All right, let's move on to Frank Mir and Alistair Overeem. So here we go. You would be hard pressed to find guys who are more written off in the UFC than these two heavyweights. It is the shared consensus among the media and fans. I believe that the best fights of both Frank Mir and Alistair Overeem are in their rearview mirrors, but they have both competed at the highest level, and that's what draws us into a fight like this. Are we going to see Hendo versus Shogun, or just a couple of guys past their prime, just plodding around for 3 rounds, trying to put together a combo to end the night? Frank Mir hasn't had a victory in his last 3 fights. In fairness, his opponents were Barnett, Cormier, and Dos Santos. Overeem's only had 1 victory in his last 3. All great opponents. He lost to Travis Brown and Bigfoot Silva. He beat Brock Lesnar, which Brock then retired, so I don't know what we can do with that victory. So the reality is that this fight is a big one, really in name only. So, I mean, can these guys still deliver? That's the question.
I agree with you 100% on Frank Mir. I think his best fights are I don't want to say far behind him, but they're definitely behind him. I don't think what happened with Josh Barnett was a fluke. I mean, he may have gotten stopped a little early, but Josh would have stopped it 10, 20 seconds later. I don't know if I agree with you on Alistair, and let me tell you why. Let's point out something about his losses, right? So he lost, especially Travis Brown, right? What do we know about Alistair's last 2 losses? He was dominating the fights. He was winning. If those go to the scorecards, Alistair wins both of his last 2 losses. Do you see what I mean? The way he destroyed Brock, I don't think was a fluke or an aberration. I actually think that was kind of who Alistair is. Let's not forget he got set back with the whole, he popped positive and he was suspended, for using. Um, but I think if Alistair wins, he has to destroy Frank though. First of all, no decision, no last second TKO. He needs to destroy him in the first or second round. If Alistair can put it together and then not be so headstrong that he's just walking forward and gets caught like he's done 2 times in a row, I actually would be interested in seeing Alistair fight somebody like Junior, or even if he can get a 4 or 5 fight win streak, fight Kane. And the reason I say is he presents a problem. His knees, his kicks to the body, his striking overall, and his strength. He presents a problem when he's on. I mean, look how he destroyed Brock.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that he can beat Kane, and I don't know if I want him to because I just think Kane's a stud, and then that's a personal Arizona connection, so I'm going to rock with Kane 100% all day. But I will say that I don't know that Alistair's washed up. But let me preface it with this. If he loses, then it's a wrap. I don't even want to see him fight anymore.
Yeah, Alistair's a tough guy to sort of get your head around because he's always going to have that value of these huge, and people like to watch him get his ass whipped. So, one way or the other. I mean, when he wins, it's devastating. When he loses, it's devastating.
Yeah.
So, destroyed Todd Duffy, destroyed Brett Rogers. So destroyed Brock Lesnar. So, I mean, the guy brings it when he brings it. But, like you said, I mean, is he going to go in there? I mean, he really was not where he needed to be against Bigfoot Silva. And in fairness, like you said, he dominated most of that fight. But, I mean, Bigfoot Silva just destroyed him and dismantled him. So I don't know how much of that played into his loss to Brown. Maybe. So, but now he's got Frank Mir, and Frank Mir is not the type of guy that's going to do that. He's not Travis Brown. He's not Antonio Silva.
No.
So it'll be an interesting fight for me, but I don't know. I mean, did these guys have it in them to give us a great fight, or do you think it's going to be either Frank tapping Alistair or Alistair KOing Frank?
Well, I hope Alistair KOs him because if Frank wins, I still don't care what he does next. I mean, who is he gonna beat? That's a top 5 heavyweight. You know what I mean? He's not.
Yeah.
He's not beating Bigfoot. He's not beating Travis Brown. He's not beating Kane. He's not beating Junior. I mean, you get the idea. I could go on and on. He's not beating any of those guys. So it almost just says for marketing and just for the heavyweight division for Alistair to win, but he has to win convincingly. And I think he can. He went back to Thailand. He did his whole camp there. He got back to his Muay Thai roots. So let's see what happens. I'm actually rather interested in this one. But I'm with you as a casual fan. If you saw this, you'd be like, really? I mean, what's to be excited about?
Well, you're right, but you're right. It is there. It could be something special. But you're right. You're also right about Frank Mir. I don't know what you do with the guy next. I mean, it's something about him. I mean, people don't like his attitude, which I understand. But there's just something about his lack of marketability as a fighter because I wouldn't want to see him fight Mark Hunt. I wouldn't want to see him fight Stefan Struve. I don't even know that I want to see him fight Stipe Miocic. And he used to be a guy. I mean, he was a big name, but he just doesn't show up sometimes. To me, he didn't show up against Daniel. And I can't have that. I can't have you going in there with a ski mask on, man. I just can't do it.
Right, exactly.
If you're going to steal money, man, you can do it another way. Be a shitty animal. Don't make me sit through your fights.
Right.
So, all right, up next, we got a couple of guys who I think are going to be of special interest to our man, John Moraga, and that is Ali Bogdanov and John Lineker. So, John Lineker, well, I'll just put down what how I meant to intro this, and then we'll talk about the weight business. A couple of young 125-pound fighters with great nicknames, maybe looking to get some bonus money as the Puncher King, Bogdanov, takes on Hands of Stone. 125 is a young division. Lots of guys sort of trying to make their way, figure out who they're going to be. Their names aren't necessarily where they need to be yet. Do you like this fight, and do you think John Moraga's got an eye on this fight?
Well, to answer the part about John, well, I could Facebook him and find out does he have his eye on it? How much interest does he have? But I don't know how much interest I would have. I got John beating either one of them, and I got him beating them soundly, just on his grit alone. Plus, he obviously has skills, legitimate skills, but I don't think they're ready for him. He's big time, and I know he lost to Mighty Mouse, but pay attention to that. He definitely was there. He was game. You know what I mean? But Lineker, Is his cardio there? Is he ready? 2 pounds overweight is a lot. You and I have talked previously off camera about how I feel about guys missing weight. I just think you're a lazy prick, and I have to suffer, and you didn't. So, and you're getting paid. I I don't know, man. But Lineker's good. That's what's crazy about it. The guy's a stud. Let's say he wins now, and he wins his next fight. He should already be fighting Mighty Mouse. But is he
Yeah,
ever going to get a shot? Because if I'm Joe Silva, I'm worried about making that matchup because he's going to come in at 126, 127. And you obviously you don't have the 1 pound variance for a championship fight. So I mean, what do you do with him? He's like Frank Mir, except he's good. But what do you do even if he wins?
that's true. And I think that I would have interest in a fight. I agree with you in that I think that John's better than both of those guys. But I mean, I wasn't super crazy about him fighting Dustin Ortiz, and that fight was okay. So
Yeah,
I don't know if these guys are going to stand. I'd sure as hell like to see him fight John, and by all accounts they are. So from your perspective, when I talk to John Crouch about missing weight, he says it's the kiss of death. You miss weight and you lose the fight. So
yes.
I mean, is it sort of one of those things where you kind of get what you deserve? Or, I mean, does anybody, there's no real advantage to missing weight, right? You're obviously, head's not in the right space or your body's not in the right space. That's why you missed the weight in the first place.
Right.
So,
Right. It's not like you're bigger, like a legitimate bigger, like I rehydrated and I ate to get bigger, and the science behind it. Usually it says your cardio is a little off. Maybe there's an injury. Maybe you're just a lazy prick. Whatever it is, look at the statistics. The number, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's some numbers that say that I think the greater percentage goes to the guy that makes weight.
right, absolutely. That's what John told me.
And you're giving me an extra incentive. To be honest, bro, some of it is emotional. It's like I suffered, man. It really sucks when you're eating kale and cutting your sodium out, and maybe you have a little bit of chicken breast. You're drinking water all day, and then you're dehydrating. Man, it's shitty physically. It's shitty mentally. I almost want to steal my own kids' food when you're like, damn, that looks delicious. You have some salt and sugar on your plate, and you're eating all kind of boring stuff to make weight. I'm not complaining. This is what you asked for, what you signed up for, but the other guy didn't do it. It's kind of like, and even if he has to give you a part of his purse, you don't care about that. There's still that I want to kick your ass. Some guys talk about it, some guys don't. But I've yet to talk to a fighter, whether amateur or pro, who doesn't have a problem with a guy or a girl missing weight. And you usually lose, and I think is you kind of get what you deserve.
Yeah. I know when I was talking to John Crouch about John's next fight, Moraga, that is. He liked a potential Ali Bogdanov fight, so we'll see. I think that like I said, these guys are both going to stand. I like a fight when each guy thinks they can knock the other guy out, and they don't think the
Yes.
other guy can knock him out. That could make for a good fight. So I wonder. I think if you miss weight, you don't get the bonus money either, do you?
I don't believe you do, but Lineker did make weight the second time, so I don't know if you're eligible if you made weight after they give you that hour. I'm curious.
All right.
I'll have to find that out.
All right. Speaking of Arizona fighters, here's another fight I'm highly interested in. Abel Trujillo
Yes.
is fighting Jamie Varner. So, all right, rounding out the main card is Abel Trujillo versus Jamie Varner. Trujillo was originally supposed to fight Bobby Green, but when he fell out, he got Varner. Jamie is no stranger to short notice fights. He derailed the Edson Barbosa hype train on short notice. Abel
Yes.
Trujillo is feeling good about himself, having just knocked Roger Bowling's head off after 2 rounds. Varner has been flip-flopping victories since Barbosa, losing to Lozon, beating Melvin Guillard, and then dropping a split decision to Gleason Tibau. Could be an interesting fight. What do you expect?
First of all, I have Jamie winning from a professional standpoint and personal, man. I like the guy a lot. We even use the same dry cleaner in Mesa when I used to live in Mesa, man. So, that was our little connection there. But he's a good dude, man. I talked to him quite a few times. We're not personal friends, but we see each other. Hey, man, how you doing? Got a lot of respect from the guy's a stud. But I'll say this: Abel Trujillo is what he looks like. He looks like a massive guy to be a lightweight, and he hits. He hits like a Mack truck. But I think Jamie's a little quicker. I think Jamie's the better overall fighter, martial artist. I think he has a few more tools. And even when Jamie lost to Lozon, do you remember how well he was doing before he lost?
was a hell of a fight.
Yeah, it was a hell of a fight. And then the decision with T-Bow, okay, and then even going in there with Melvin. A lot of people thought Melvin was gonna knock his block off, and look what happened. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in the flip flop syndrome, this is Jamie's time to flop to a win, and then hopefully he stays on a win streak. I've got him, but it's not going to be easy. And I also think he has better cardio than Abel as well. Though if this goes into the late part of the second round and into the third, I think that highly favors Jamie. His work ethic is there, so I think he's going to have more wins.
Well, and here's the question. The first thing I'll say about Abel Trujillo, because I'm staring at the guy here on Fight Finder, and I'll give a shout out to my wife in the sense that Abel Trujillo looks like the kid from Grey's Anatomy, that good-looking, blue-eyed son of a bitch
The
on
black
steroids.
dude, the light-skinned brother, yeah.
Yeah, he looks just like him. He looks like his older ass-kicking brother. But
Right.
that aside, he's been a pro since '09, so my question is this. Can a guy like Jamie Varner, who's been a champ, everybody forgets that. I mean, he's championship
Correct.
medal, he's championship material. He's been there. Can a guy like Jamie Varner use just sort of his wiliness, his experience, to get through a fight with a lesser experienced fighter? Now, if a guy's if he's on the rise, you can be whoever you are. I mean, look what John Jones did to Shogun and how young you.
Yeah.
If you're just destined to be that guy, that so be it. But I mean, can a guy like Jamie Varner sort of feel it out and go, I could take a fight on short notice because I'm comfortable when I'm in there, and I've been in 1,000 fights, and this is not overwhelming to me. I mean, can he use that to his advantage, do you think?
I do. And let's not forget, when you mentioned the Edson Barboza fight, Jamie's got enough to put you away. He can submit you. He hits hard enough. That's the other thing too, is Abel. I don't know if Abel. What happens if he gives Jamie his best, even if he puts Jamie in deep waters, which Jamie's been in before, and Jamie comes out and keeps his head above the surface? Does that take away a little bit of heart from Abel? Because I don't think Jamie's going to lose his heart or his ability. I don't think he's going to doubt himself if he is hurt or if he's put in a little deep water. If Abel's in deep water, I think it's going to be a problem, man. I think Jamie's wily enough. I think he has enough tools, and he may simply outlast him.
And honestly, I mean, sometimes we Colin Cowherd famously says that we can sometimes be prisoners of the moment. And listen, he fought Roger Bowling, and he threw a strike against that kid, not to use a shitty pun, but, I mean, he took him out. So when you think of Abel Trujillo, you're like, Jesus, man, he just destroyed that kid, which is all fine and dandy. But when you look down what the kid's done, I mean, listen, he lost the decision to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and the rest of it is a bunch of guys. I mean, he lost to a dude named Alonzo Martinez and Scott Cleave as recently as 2011 in Extreme Challenge. So let's not start turning Abel Trujillo into the next coming of Iron Tyson. And Jamie Varner is a dude. I mean, he is a name in this sport for which he has earned. You know what I'm saying? Jamie Varner is not just, he's not like some sort of popular cartoon character or power. I mean, he earned his name. The reason why you know who Jamie Varner is because he's cracked folks forever. So that's the thing. I mean, Abel just knocked a guy out, and we don't even know who the hell he is, really. I mean,
exactly.
Just knocked somebody's block off that was of significance. So while Abel looks the part, and he's coming off a huge win, let's take a moment to realize who he's fighting, and does it mean that Jamie will not lose? No. Anything can happen. I mean, that's why they fight the fights. But I don't know, man. I just think that to discount Jamie because some bulked up dude took some nobody out. I'm not down with that.
Right, because and Abel's not more powerful than Melvin Gillard.
Absolutely.
And look at that. So Jamie's genuinely not afraid, and people say that does or doesn't matter. It matters because sometimes it can make you have a little trepidation and you freeze a little bit. Jamie won't. So if Abel's gonna beat him, he's gonna have to beat a good Jamie Varner. You know what I mean? He can't be in there making mistakes, or Jamie will catch him and he'll capitalize.
And that's the thing, kind of like what I was talking about with the experience, is like, if there is going to be a moment in that fight, you and I both talked about bulked up guys like that having to oxygenate those muscles and do all that. if Abel's going to come out and try and be the storm that Jamie has to weather, I mean, listen, Jamie will take that boat right through. He'll be in the perfect storm, moving sails, and I mean, he's not afraid to be in bad. The point I'm trying to get across is, I doubt in the first or second round, Abel's going to put Jamie in a place he's never been.
Right. He's not gonna. There's nothing he's gonna do that Jamie hasn't
in the
seen.
octagon or the cage he's ever had.
Right.
And for that reason, I like his chances of coming out the other side.
I agree. I agree 100%.
So the rest of the card is really, I mean, uneventful in terms of names. I'm sure there's some good fights on there. Nobody that sort of jumps out to you. There is a lab fighter on there. His name escapes me. Andy Enns.
Yeah.
He's fighting Clint Hester, and Clint Hester's another guy that looks, sometimes
He's
if you want to, yeah, he is an athlete, but at the same time, you want to talk about sports cliches. Sometimes they look like Tarzan and fight like Jane, and Hester had his moments, where he's not what he looks like. So, you got to see, maybe hope that Andy can pull it out. So, the card aside, what we do typically at the end of the show is this, and this has been a long one, so I'm going to have to cut this thing up real nice. But the thing that we do at the end of the show is finish strong. So what I want to, usually we use it as an opportunity to get on our soapbox and talk about whatever we want to. What I want to use my finish strong time for, and yours, is to talk about your fight. So where are you at in your preparation, and how is everything coming?
Man, everything's coming really great, man. I feel good. I was injured previously with a wrist, and you never realize what a wrist can do for your weight and all that. For the last fight that I had back on November 23rd of last year, right before Thanksgiving, I had to lose just an ungodly amount of weight that I won't mention, and I did. But this time I don't, man. But I feel great. My cardio feels great. And these next 4 weeks I'll be kicking it in high gear, man. So I'm ready, man. I'm not one to really make predictions. I just know that I'm not showing up to lose, and I'm ready. Because last time my daughter, who will be 5 tomorrow, said, "But Daddy, but you're like the best, Daddy. You can't lose. Why did you lose?" So now now I got to get that W, and that does matter.
Yeah, I bet. So let me ask you this. So since we're talking about the fight is raging in the cage, so I want to talk about the lower organizations in a sense of this. How do you prepare for an opponent differently? Is it harder to scout them? Are you the type of person that would scout a guy, and is it hard to do? Do you kind of rely on word of mouth? What is your way to sort of, your physicalness aside and what you're bringing to the table, how do you sort of prepare yourself for whoever the guy's going to be you're fighting?
Right. So that's threefold. First of all, I work on me. I come from striking, so wrestling would be my weaker point. The submission game. So I just assume, kind of in my head, I'll say, okay, this guy may have a drop on me, from the submission grappling side. So I'm gonna push that. But then also, I've been blessed, man, to know a lot of fighters. Joe Cronin, you know what I mean, is a guy I look up to, even though we're 5 days apart in age. And a lot of the local fighters who will look and watch video, Joey Maiola, LaRue Burley, a lot, and LaRue is now a Bellator guy. I know these guys personally, you know what I mean? And so, long story short, I'll say, hey man, here's this guy I'm fighting, look up video, tell me what you think. And I usually have them do it before I look, so that I'm getting an actual honest assessment of what he does or doesn't do better than me. And then I am a guy who will watch. I usually watch once or twice. The first time I watch just as a fan to say, here's what I see. Oh, it looks like he has big power. He has great takedowns. The second time I watch it is for a couple of nuances, and then I won't watch it again after that, because now you're playing with the game of, oh, he did that to this guy, kind of like what you said with Trujillo. Just because you knock one guy out doesn't mean you're gonna knock the next guy out. You know what I mean? You know one guy I knocked out. You know what I mean? And the guy's a pretty big dude, compared to me, and I knocked him out cold. But then my next fight, I hit the guy with some pretty good body shot and everything. It didn't put him out. He ended up getting a guillotine on me. You know what I mean? So I don't want to focus too much on, oh my gosh, he might do this or he might do that. But I will say, when you're coming off a loss, for me, coming off a loss, it's easier to get ready than coming off a win. I know that sounds weird, but it's because now there's a little bit of extra hunger. There's some embarrassment. There's a lot of things that come with a loss. But more importantly, now it's like, man, it fucking sucks to lose, bro. So you want to win. You know what I mean?
Right.
Point blank.
And it's a tired cliche, and I don't mean it to judge you as a man overall overall, but it's it's the old saying, you're only as good as your last fight. So personally, you have to take that as like, well, if I was to stop fighting tomorrow, the last fight I ever had, I'd be a loss. So
Yeah.
there's that thing that's hanging out there. So here's another question I always ask fighters, and I'm going to ask you: how difficult is it to close a hole in your game mid-fight? So if someone finds a combination that works,
Hmm.
maybe they do a leg kick and then throw a straight, and it gets through. It seems like in fights they keep getting through because you've been training one way for all these weeks and you react a certain way. Is that hole just going to be there, or is there a way to sort of like you got to just tell yourself, listen, I gotta stop this?
Man, first of all, that's where coaching comes in. People think we just have corners for show or to hang out or hey, I know this fighter. That matters because it may have to be something to simply say, hey, listen, Leroy, I'm southpaw, right? So if they're terrorizing my right leg, which is forward, you know what I mean? They may have to say something like switch stances, which I'm comfortable standing orthodox, or even say, you know what? Okay, we're going to take this and we're going to counter with this to make the guy not want to do it. So I don't think you can fix the hole per se, but I think it is fairly easy and doable to find a counter to what's hurting you. But if you don't fix it, a la Rampage and Forrest Griffin, just using a leg kick reference, it's gonna happen all night. And I don't think a guy's cheap or boring when they do the same thing all night and it works. But it's very hard in the fight because you're playing with a guy's ego mixed with his training and habits come. And habits are there, man. And sometimes if a guy's not checking kicks or he's getting hit with a jab and then it leads to a takedown, that's hard to fix mid fight. That usually has to be done in camp.
All right, so I'll end on this, and it's just because it's something I haven't asked you previously, and it's one of those things that sometimes when you have goals, it's better to say them out loud to somebody. So what is the end game for you in terms of, is this something you enjoy doing at the level you're at, and it's kind of something you enjoy doing, or is it Bellator, is it UFC? I mean, is it the sky's the limit in terms of what you want, or do you get the fix that you need from it in the capacity that it has in your life right now?
Yeah, it's weird, man. I've been doing martial arts since I was 9, so I get to still stay in my martial arts, and I will be a martial artist even when I stop fighting. As far as MMA. Um, but this may sound weird, man, but I, as I like to say, Azabi the smart one, sir. I want to keep I want to keep my brain intact, man. And so something I've talked about with my wife and my mother a lot is the neurological issue, man. My wife is in the medical field, and with her being a nurse, man, something that comes to mind is I don't know that I want to fight much more after this year. And when I want to get my male ego fixed and my martial arts fixed, and I want to hit somebody legally and not catch a felony, there's so many guys that are more than willing to punch me in the face and let me punch them in the face that are high level pros just here locally that I have access to, so that's a blessing. But I actually don't plan on fighting much longer, man, because you can get hurt, man. I look at Muhammad Ali, my opinion, the best to ever do it, but look at him now, and I don't want to be that
Yeah,
dude.
that's true. It's almost a weird coincidence of guys who and listen, what happened to Muhammad Ali is tragic, and from what I understand, there's two types of, it's Parkinson's syndrome and Parkinson's disease, and one is brought about by head trauma, and one is just you get it if you've never been hit in the head.
Right,
I think syndrome,
like Michael J. Fox. Right,
right? He has disease, and
right,
Freddie Roach has syndrome.
correct.
So, but yeah, I mean, it always, and again, not to make light of it, but it always fascinated me, these guys that did so much talking in their primes, as they got older, it just, that it was no longer a part of their, for whatever reason, it was no longer a part of their lives. For different, like Richard Pryor and Muhammad Ali, these are two guys that talked so much in the prime of their lives, and then towards the end, that was something that was taken from them. It always
Exactly.
struck me as odd. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you see what Freddie Roach has to put himself through to continue to be a coach, and what Muhammad Ali goes through, obviously, I mean, it's a tough existence, if you don't if you're not on that track. But with that being said, I think that the advantage that you have is there are a lot of things that are going to be available to you because of your mind, and I think that may be the aspect of it. Like, I mean, not listen. I talk to a lot of guys in MMA, and they don't just come on to something like this and just roll with it. And to have you got a good brain for that, you probably would have a hell of a brain as a trainer. So that could be where it comes. So I wish you the best. I'm gonna try my best to be at your fight, and we'll get going from there. But I do want to get you on Twitter and start to put the thing on blast a little bit more and have some fun with it. If it's not gonna go too much longer, let's see what we can do with it. So
yeah, I'm gonna give you an honest answer too, man.
yeah, absolutely. So that's what makes it fun. So again, all right, let's go ahead and shut this thing down. So yeah, my guest today was Leroy Lullabye Douglas
the third.
He is fighting March 1st in Phoenix, Arizona at Celebrity Theater. Leroy, I appreciate I appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to do this again soon.
My man, I appreciate it, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take it easy.